Fortunate to have this gift, to be sitting next to you and having this conversation, and also to be sitting next to another Brandy who is also Chickasaw. What are the odds, y'all? Fantastic, right? So I'm going to pass the mic to you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, Brandy.
Hello, yes, I'm also Brandy Berry Benson. I spell my name with a I, B-R-A-N-D-I, and a little different than the IE, but But yes, what are the odds? I feel like, yes, that has been, just as you said, truly a gift to be connected to you through, having to be here. I actually used to go to Indiana University back in the day. I went here for grad school. I did my master's in Baroque violin performance, and then moved to Chicago after that. And so now I currently coach the Baroque Music Ensemble at Northwestern University in Chicago. I also still teach a little bit at DePaul University, and I also co-direct, I should say, the BBE, or the Bach and Beethoven experience, with Leanne Dale Ragusa, who you're going to hear tonight on a variety of flutes. And so yeah, that's kind of my story. I'm actually from Texas originally. I am also a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation through my mother's line. And my great-grandfather was actually the last on the Dawes Rolls, and he was probably, I think he was like 5 or 6 years old when Indian Territory became Oklahoma State. So you're going to hear some of that in the musical narrative. But before I say any more, I'm going to pass it back to Brandy, because I know we're going to have a little back and forth here in conversation. So.
And that's something Brandy and I have in common, that our heritage is connected to our mother's line, which I think is really beautiful as well, thinking of the common places that we both hold, and our love for our community and for Indigenous people, and the ways in which that you find ways to celebrate it and integrate it into your passions, right? And I think that that's what you all will be hearing this evening. So thank you for coming and coming for this discussion. Is Paisha, the story of Paisha. Can you talk a little bit about the story? I know that we talked prior to this, and you just talked a little bit in terms of just the cadence, the ways in which that you integrated such really important narratives in this journey of your family, but also how it started with this really important woman.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll start first with who Paisha is. She's actually my 4th great grandmother. Her, I guess you could say, U.S. American name was Amelia Wolfe, and she is the daughter of Captain James Wolfe, who was one of the chiefs of the Chickasaw Nation, who signed a number of important treaties, including the Treaty of Pontotoc Creek, and a number of others surrounding the removal of the Chickasaws from their homelands in Mississippi before they made the trek to Indian Territory. And so I actually grew up with a portrait of her in my living room, like as a child, and looking up on her. The Chickasaw Nation as a people has their I guess what you could say, like their mantra, or like what they're known for, is unconquered and unconquerable. And so they've always been a people that has adapted, just taken everything with like, well, this is the way things are going, what can we make the best of this situation? That's the way they've always been. And that's, honestly, the mindset and the mentality that I learned from my mom's side of the family, because they, after Indian Territory, grew up in West Texas, where if you're not around anything, you kind of have to fend for yourself. And so they were a very hardy people, and just understood, that sometimes in order to survive and progress, like, you need to adapt, and that was always their mentality. But so Paisha, she was my 4th great grandmother. You'll hear a little bit of her story in this work, The Story of Paisha, which is a piece of work that I composed, I put together. I wrote the narration, I wrote the music as well. There are my own original settings and arrangements too of some of the Chickasaw songs and traditional dances and hymns that show up in the Choctaw hymnal, which is shared between the Chickasaw and Choctaw nations, which are neighboring tribes. And so you'll hear a little bit about her story and the removal of, living in Mississippi and then, making that trek to Indian Territory. There's also, you'll learn about her daughter. So Paisha actually died giving birth to Mary Chico, who she married Charlie Chico. And so Mary Chico is my 3rd great grandmother. Mary actually met and married a Civil War soldier named John, and he intermarried into the tribe. And they actually started a small town called Yarnaby. They met on the banks of the Red River in Texas. while he was missing in action for a little bit, and he had promised to come back and marry her, and which he did. And he married her at Bloomfield Academy. And Bloomfield Academy is really significant because that was a Chickasaw-run boarding school. And what they believed was they wanted to have their own boarding school to learn what they called, quote unquote, the white ways, right? But not because they were trying to leave their culture or their heritage behind, but to them, in their eyes, it meant I'm going to be on a level playing field with these other people, and I can negotiate better. Survival, yeah. Totally survival. But out of that came, on the music side of things, because that's what I always look for. They did learn Western instruments. Like there's even a photograph of like 12 to 15 Chickasaw women holding violins and guitars and mandolins, and we know they learned piano. And so they took that and just went further with it. Another interesting thing to note actually about the Chickasaws and a lot of all the other southeastern tribes too, is that they didn't have a written language. They didn't notate things were orally passed down. And so, when you're, so anyway, that's probably getting into other subjects, but to continue on, so Mary married John, and then they had 9 children together. The next person you're going to hear about in the story is one of their daughters that survived to adulthood, named Rosa Ella. And Rosa Ella was alive during the time when Indian Territory transitioned into becoming Oklahoma State. And that was really significant because when Indian Territory was done away with, what it meant was that there was a change in citizenship status for the tribes. And so if you were, and I have actually a VHS tape that still works. My parents still have a VCR somehow that still plays this tape. But it's my great-grandfather remembering as a child, he said that his mother basically lied about her blood quantum because she didn't want restricted citizenship. So if she was a half-blood or higher, which she was, she would have had her affairs governed by the government. And so you could actually see documentation where all of a sudden her mother is now 7/8 and she's 7/16 or something. Like the fractions get really, there's nothing biological about them. But, but the point is that those were adjusted so that she wouldn't have restrictions on her citizenship. And that was something really, yeah.
And just really quick, in terms of blood quantum, just really thinking about the challenges of blood quantum. It's really trying to gauge how much Indian you are, how much Native you are, right? So it's kind of thinking about similar to dehumanization, but very much in the space of kind of kill the Indian, save the man. So really thinking of how do you breed out, how do you track how many natives are, and in order to be citizens, like with what you're talking about, just in case, I'm not sure if everyone knows about blood quantum, but it's quite challenging. And also, many people have to make a decision, which was what you're talking about your ancestors. If you want to be a citizen and the benefits of that, then you stop claiming your nativeness, right? And lower your blood quantum, which then impacts future ancestors. And now it's something similar. We still struggle with that.
Totally, yeah. And actually, you're going to hear that in the story of Baisha, where there's a moment where she, and this is characterized by the music, The Wayfaring Stranger, which was adopted into the Choctaw hymnal. And so I've actually said it in the way that they would have sung it, which is slightly different than like what most folk circles sing it. But then I end that section with a very 19th century, almost orchestral kind of sound, to kind of depict the fact that every census after Oklahoma became a state, she claimed white. She totally dropped her indigenous identity. And her kids did too. My great-grandfather, as proud as he was of his Chickasaw heritage, still claimed white, even to his death on every census. And so that's what prompted me to explore why the change. Why did she do that? And then we happen to have this VHS, which I'm so glad he recorded that, to tell us, well, this is why, this is what we were afraid of. Who knows if that would have actually, maybe that wasn't totally the story in the Chickasaw tribe, because I had talked to some of the other citizens of the Chickasaw Nation who had said, well, wouldn't have happened necessarily, but it was a fear in my family, and it was a very real one because they saw that happening to other citizens of other tribes. So that story is in there about her dropping her indigenous identity. And then the piece actually concludes with my great-grandfather, Ernest, meeting his wife, Elvira, who is actually from Southern Illinois, which is kind of ironic that I ended up in Chicago after grad school. But her and her family in the wintertime traveled down to the Texas Panhandle and left everything behind them. And, they weren't, how the story goes is like the parents were saying, we're probably not going to be able to celebrate Christmas this year. But then when they got there, the townspeople had whittled little toys and things for her and her brothers. So they were actually able to have a holiday after all. And so that's a really special and meaningful story because it just spoke to the hospitality that they received, and I think, in the community. And so, but that's how she ended up in Texas, and then she met my great-grandfather who, they had moved away from Oklahoma after it had become a state, and he was a cotton gin farmer for a while and then a mailman, and, they traveled, after they got married, they traveled to Tishomingo, which is the capital of the Chickasaw Nation, often, because he was very much wanting to find out everything he could about the Chickasaw lineage and his family line. So those are the stories. There's four major stories that you're going to hear in this work.
I used to go swimming in Tishomingo as I grew up in Oklahoma, and so I love hearing these bits and pieces that connect us in so many different ways, but also thinking of how the ancestors in these spaces, like where they lived, where they decided to settle, where they thrived, right? Yeah. And then that's why we're here today. Yeah. I think one of the common things that I'm also hearing, and I don't know if you all hear it, I love love, just so you all know, I love love. And I hear a lot of love in a variety of different stories, from when people met each other, where they decided to settle, even the decision around how to and why to switch identity. Maybe it was a space of love, right, and thrivance, and it's a hard decision, conflict. Yeah. And so thinking about, leaning into the love, and thinking about those emotions, like when you, and I'm not a music person, although I love music, but I just want, please forgive me if I don't know this, but when you develop a piece or compose a piece, especially thinking about the story of Paisha, what are some of the emotions that you were really trying to hope that the audience sees, or that you were embedded within this specific story?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, so I think the biggest thing is that I wanted to use the music of the Chickasaw and Choctaw Nations, the music that they would have, been hearing, and I had no problem including strings, especially after seeing that picture from Bloomfield Academy, and just knowing the mentality of the Chickasaws that yes, they would have loved, to progress their music further. But what I hope from the biggest thing that I think I took away from my family heritage, and love comes in a lot of different packages, like when you're talking about the sacrifice, but then also the decisions that are made to protect the family. But the thing that really intrigued me was that no family member ever held a grudge against their circumstances. They always were just like, well, this was the hand we dealt, so let's play the best hand we got. And so they never held a grudge. They never, and my grandmother lived like this, actually. And I am certain that she got this from her parents, and so did my grandfather. Even when they encountered tragedy in their life, they never let that pull them down. They still lived their life, still lived a very lovely, full life. And I think that is actually a testament to that side of my family, because you could see that through all these stories, they've been through a lot. Especially with Mary and John, having 9 children, but only half of them surviving to adulthood. And just knowing that they had obviously such a deep love for each other, because he risked, being missing in action for his duties as a soldier, when he met her, and then came back and married her, and he integrated into the Chickasaw tribe, actually. So he was marked on the Dawes rolls as IW, intermarried white. And what was funny is that her daughter, Rosa Ella, the one who gave up her indigenous identity, she actually married a white man too, and he intermarried white into the tribe while Oklahoma was Indian territory. And so I think it's not, you see these people that they're like, well, I'm willing to give up whatever life I knew before for the life we've got now. And I think that's like a recurring theme, from the removal, from the relationships that you see that go down my family's history. So
yeah, and I think it's so so important. Sorry, I'm all choked up because I'm like, it's so powerful, right? And the way that they're still with us, even to this day, and the way that they've inspired the work that you do, and how you're creating. And you're I'm such a fan. And so even just thinking about the talented composer that you are, but also I think one of the things I just recently learned is that you're also an incredible researcher and scholar. And so would you mind telling us and sharing some of the research work that you do, and also kind of even just, I think, research work that you did digging into the story of Puppy Shop?
Oh, for sure. Well, so the research, I wanted first I started with, okay, here's what I know about my family, and I'm just going to go follow that. And I did. I followed that into, the Chickasaw Nation, and went to Tishomingo and found handwritten letters from my great-grandfather. I also went to the Chickasaw Cultural Center because they have a really like massive, very cool Holiso archives there of just all sorts of, not only just genealogical information, but just information about, the Chickasaw Nation and a lot of different aspects of living and things like that. And I wanted to know the music behind, what was some of the significance of the dances, finding out that the Stealing Partners dance is a courtship dance, the Garfish dance is one of the oldest dances still danced, today, and for a time, and celebrating, good times. The removal, or the memorial song called La Paleta, being, a song that is done in memory of somebody, for a funeral. And so those types of songs are, and that type of music is actually incorporated all through the story to help to show, like, when two people meet, the Stealing Partners dance, or the memorial song for the removal, and then also for the death of somebody. Or so I talked about the Choctaw hymnal. This is actually an incredible body of work because the missionaries came and, of course, they lived among the Choctaws and the Chickasaws, and what they did was they, for whatever, take it or leave it for what it is, but this is what happened. They basically matched the sounds that they were hearing them say to our English alphabet, and then came up with the written version of the language. Now, how much, of course, there's all sorts of questions you could ask, like how much can actually truly be notated? Does this really match up? All of those things. But what that did then was just create a bridge, is what it did. And the Choctaw hymnal, while the Choctaws were learning hymns, European hymns, they were composing their own. And so in the Choctaw hymnal, you've got hymns that are originally from Choctaw, ministers, Choctaw people that it's almost like they observed what they were learning, but then they thought, well, this is my own expression. And you can hear, actually, in the opening of section 6 is a Choctaw hymn. It doesn't follow the traditional form of a European hymn, and it has different sounds to it. So you'll hear that, and I've set it to instrument voices. So I've maintained the voicing from the hymnal, but realized it through instruments, so that you can hear it like that. But yeah, just lots of different examples of the music, and how I've interweaved and reworked some things and used little motifs here or there that signified specific times in someone's life. And then, of course, you're going to hear music that is slightly familiar, like a Civil War theme, or some folk music or whatever of the time, because they would have been hearing that and running into that too.
You also have a fellowship
I do,
If
yeah.
you're interested in maybe talking about that fellowship.
Yes,
I
yeah.
love the fellowship of dismantling and shifting the paradigm of how we
Sure.
think about Native musicians historically.
Yeah, well, so I do have as a faculty member of Northwestern and affiliate, I'm also an affiliate of the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research at Northwestern too, and so I was awarded a fellowship to research the influence that the 5 civilized tribes have had on early American music, not the other way around, because there has been a lot of documentation and research done on, the encounters, right, and like what people have tried to notate of what they heard in, Western classical notation, and of course, it's like, what did you not hear, and there are things that aren't able to be notated in that system. But it occurred to me too that there is a lot of impact that Native American music has had on early American music. Even so, Jared Tate, who is somebody you should definitely Google, he's a big Chickasaw composer. He told me in a conversation that we had that he really believed that the 5 civilized tribes also had an influence on the beginning of the blues, the origin of the blues and the Irish reel and like things like that. And I was like, oh, well, tell me more. But then that prompted me to do my own research and figure out, okay, what are those ties that he's talking about, and how have indigenous people, brought their influence into the early American, just soundscape, if you will, if you want to call it that.
Oh, it makes me so excited, because I know I just have so many questions, but I can't ask them here, because I want to open it up to see if you all have questions for Brandy. Yes?
I do. I have several. First of all, you had indicated that some of your ancestors had kind of rejected Chickasaw identity and had embraced whiteness. So are things changing now? Are people rediscovering or reinventing a sense of Chickasawness? That's number one.
Okay, well, so I don't know if I would use the word reject as much as cover.
Cover, yeah.
Yeah, because they definitely, that identity was still very much important to them, but out of fear, they covered it. But it's interesting that you asked that question, because I remember I was talking with my mom one day about this, and she was like, well, because I asked her about this, and this was what prompted us to, dig deeper, like, what do you have that possibly could have my great-grandfather speaking on this subject? And she said, well, back then it wasn't cool to be Indian. She just kind of said it really flippantly like that, but I thought about that, and I thought, well, okay, so at that time, it really wasn't quote-unquote cool, right? Because it had, some serious implications to that. Nowadays, people are wanting to know more, and I think there's a lot more dialogue because they realize, if you cover up something, that means you're also missing out on it. And I feel like, too, one of the conversations I had with Jared Tate, who I mentioned earlier, he said, the whole blood quantum thing that philosophy has shifted. It used to be like, how much are you? How much should we listen to you about whatever thing you are doing that's related to us, or that is a part of us, or that is about us. Nowadays, he said, it doesn't matter what fraction you are. It's as if you're 100%. Sure. And that's the way that they view it now, at least in the Chickasaws and the Choctaws. I can't speak for every tribe on that issue because everybody feels differently, and how the indigenous community feels on any given subject is incredibly nuanced because everybody has a different history.
I have two more. I'll try to be quick. Number two, the Chickasaw or Choctaw hymnal, is that done in conventional Western notation? How does that work?
Oh, yeah. Well, so it has some attributes of conventional Western notation and some that are not, some that are a little closer to like shape notes. And also too, you've got the written down Choctaw language, which the Chickasaw and the Choctaw language is very, very, very similar. They probably share like 90-something% of the words. They're very, very similar. So, and the Choctaw hymnal has been through a number of editions. I think they're actually on their 8th edition or something like that. So.
And then one very final one. So where did Bach and Beethoven come in? I was sort of puzzled by looking at the program.
That was, so we've been around since 2009, which is, this is definitely going to date me, but that is not long after I graduated from IU and moved to Chicago. And so I started this group, and we were all about Bach and Beethoven. In fact, we did a bunch of concerts that were just Bach, and we had some Beethoven thrown in there occasionally. We are actually in the process of undergoing a name update because we keep doing all these different kinds of projects that we're really excited about, and the name doesn't quite serve us because when people think of Bach and Beethoven, they're thinking we're a straight up Baroque group, and at one time we were, and we haven't been since 2016.
Thank you.
And you mentioned language, and so I just want to do a shout out for our Chickasaw Nation app, because we have an app as well if you want to download. I know it's fantastic, y'all. And it has the words are written out, but then if you click on it, it'll say it in both the northern dialect and the southern dialect, and much of the southern dialect is very similar to Choctaw. And so like when you say hello, it can be Chokma or it can be Halito. And Halito is Choctaw. Chokma is typically what a lot of Chickasaw say. Sometimes I'll say both of them and then I'm saying hello like twice, hello squared to people. But the app is really wonderful and has a variety of different pieces of information on there. So please download it. We would love y'all to learn our language.
For sure.
Yes?
I just wanted to say I checked out a book of Cherokee dictionary prompted by seeing Wilma Manfiller on a quarter and wondering what those letters were.
Oh yeah.
Is it syllabary? Is what Cherokee say? What their language is called? Syllabary?
Yeah.
I'm not sure though, because what Cherokee, like what that says specifically.
Yeah, I personally haven't delved much,
It's just on a quarter.
Yeah, I bet you, honestly, I bet you could Google it, because there's a lot of information out there on the Cherokees. A lot of information,
sure.
especially Cherokee syllabary, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that will be part of my research fellowship, but on the music side of things, which will involve some language. I mean, those are connected for sure.
Yeah, and really powerful that the matriarchs, we're a matriarchal society, and her being a matriarch of the Cherokee community, a chief as well, being on the quarter, really powerful.
Exactly.
We have time because I have one last question for you, but maybe we have one more time for one more question from the group if you all have one more question. Otherwise, I'm going to lean into my question. Yeah, please.
Aside from the hymnal that you've talked about, are there any other old musically notated sources from which you've been able to work?
There are, not quite like the Choctaw hymnal, and that's actually part of my research too, is to uncover even more of those sources, because what I found so far exists in kind of bits and pieces. But hopefully I'm going to be uncovering a whole lot more when it comes to that. So
my last question before we say goodbye to you all is, we've already discussed how we love, and also talking about some of the challenges that you'll hear within this, the piece later on as well. Much of Native communities and identity is this balance between the challenges and the impacts of genocide, some of the pain, and yet there's also what we've talked about is love and thrivance and connection to our ancestors, our communities, past, present, and future, and joy. And so we wanted to end on a space of joy, because what's more Native than holding on to that joy, right? And that connection. And so my question to you is, what brings you joy?
Well, I have to say, sharing this very personal story with you brings me a lot of joy. And it brings me a lot of joy that my great-grandfather did all of that for our family, whether we understood or appreciated it as much as we should have at the time. I've so appreciate it now, and I think it's just there's a lot of I remember I heard once that, there's power in nuance in your story. There's power in the small details. And so I just feel like, when you start to share some of the, a little bit deeper, some of the details of what's, happened or what you've seen in your family, that opens up a door for other people to connect with you as well, because likely they've had similar stories that can relate in their family history. So it brings me a lot of joy, to be able to share this piece with you and share this part of my family history with you.
Thank you. Again, I just feel so lucky to be able to be in this space. It's like the gift of being able to know you and to hear the music that you all have prepared. Thank you all for this time and for the questions and giving us the gift of your space. You didn't have to be here tonight, and yet you are here. So thank you.